Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So there is something horribly wrong with our healthcare systems all over the world. And so, our governments have tried to fix them, but apparently they're unfixable. So the superhero of last resort seems to be the only person who can fix our healthcare system, and that is the consumer. That is me, that is all of you, that is we the many. And so this is what this book is about. So Eric Topol's new book, which will arrive in China in June, has taken America by storm already. He is the advocate of the consumer medical revolution. And this book says that within 3 years, the consumer will take charge. It will be in the driver's seat of healthcare. He will choose his own doctors, will choose his own therapies, will probably prescribe his own drugs, and he will demand consumer rights. When that happens, a complete chain of information of the medical sector will move to the consumer. That means that the medical sector will actually be in demand, and the consumer will be in supply. A seller's market becomes a buyer's market, and this will dramatically, impact our society. The medical industry in America and in Europe are focused now on bringing medical systems to the home. And basically they take these big, accurate hospital systems, they dumb them down into point of care, put them in doctor's offices, and then dumb them down into home devices. The problem is, and I think that's where China is actually 5 years ahead of the United States. The problem is that we are no longer at home. We are nomadic. We are in the street. And we want technology that can follow us wherever we go. So our company in Silicon Valley, for instance, has made this new technology. This is a complete emergency room in the power of your hand. You can do it several times a day. Your systolic, your diastolic blood pressure, your heart rate, your SpO2, your PPG, your ECG wave, all in here. And people ask me, what is the technology behind this? And it's data. It's a data capturing device. It's all machine learning. And this is a big thing for the future. Data will eat physiology. So it is unstoppable. Data will also become a revenue stream. If you look at PlayStation 4 now, PlayStation 4 was a very big thing for Sony. PlayStation 5 will even be bigger because they discovered something in PlayStation 4. Wherever you plug a PlayStation in the wall, that PlayStation will gather all the information of you as a gamer through each of the games. And that data stream, Sony is selling. It already makes a very interesting part of its revenue. And PlayStation 5 will be more and more concentrated into granular depth, how gamers can actually go through games. They will sell that back to the game manufacturers. They will capture the data, put them in algorithms, these algorithms into new analytics so that they make better games and have more gamers. The same thing with Google, the driverless cars. Everyone thinks like, why are these cars so ugly? Well, Google is a data company. They're not in the car business. So these cars, when they drive through a city, per second, they store 700 megabytes of data. Basically, Google is making a graphics processing system. They will sell us these data streams. Now, the interesting part for the medical sector is that, so we are asking ourselves the question, like, which data streams are we going to develop? Which data streams are we going to sell? Or perhaps more interesting, which data streams would we be willing to buy in order to enrich our data streams so that we can sell more? Because that is the new metric. You capture data, put them in algorithms, and these algorithms get more customers who exhaust more data. So whoever learns the fastest wins. An interesting question nowadays is, what do we call somebody who programs computers? And most people will say, oh, it's a programmer or an analyst, but the real thing that now programs computers are algorithms. And algorithms now program other algorithms. And of course, there are people who program computers, but that's software. So what is the difference between software and algorithms? Well, you see, software does what we tell it to. An algorithm makes up its own mind. An algorithm can learn. It can learn unsupervised. It can evolve, and it kills the previous versions of itself. But what is even more distinctive about algorithms is, you see, we understand software, but we don't understand algorithms anymore. Because we have an algorithm, for instance, for systolic and diastolic blood pressure. 50 million records are chased in data streams in PPG and ECG waves through GPUs. And out comes a very long algorithm that only obeys two things. It doesn't know what it is. It's looking for 8 millimeters of mercury standard deviation and 0.5 mean absolute error. It's a very, mathematical construct. Now, I believe that a sort of a new warfare is coming on between companies that have mathematical machines and algorithms and decades of knowledge in these algorithms, and companies who are just service companies. And if you don't have machine learning in your company, and you don't capture the exhaust data of your customers, and you put that in your algorithms and in your mathematical machines, you are on a very interesting way to extinction, because no way you are going to beat these other companies. So you see, when we have hardware, that's atoms, and we protect hardware with patents. And software, that's bits, and we protect it in copyright. But algorithms, that's pure neurons. And these neurons, they're trade secrets. So you can't license them. Probably the valuation of a company in the future will be its neuronal activity, its algorithmic learning. And that's a very, very interesting thing to think about in the medical sector and actually in the whole industry. Yeah, time to talk to you about the tricorder. So my company is in the Tricorder X Prize of Qualcomm. We are in the 7 last teams out of 330. You see, when I was young and in Catholic school, we had a TV series called Star Trek. And this TV series has actually made me into, a scientist, made me go to college because, first of all, it was very cool, it was all about science, and it was more, there were girls in it, and they looked up to the scientists, which was enough for a 14-year-old boy to think that this was the way to go. But they had this device in there, a tricorder, and you just scan someone, and the device did several things, actually 3 things, First, it scans, it calculates, and it records. But what is more, it learns. So every time you do it, the device learns about you or about the people around you. And that's what it gets really interesting. Because, you see, just imagine that we would have a device that would learn about ourselves the more we use it. Wouldn't we consult it several times a day? So it seems to be like the winning thing, the acquisition of learning is very exciting, and at the same time, it's learning about ourselves. So if you look at the killer app, forgive the notation, for medical, that is what it's going to be. And also thinking about what, we have been experimenting in our company with computer vision. So where we say, we take a picture of you, and the machine guesses. The algorithms guess your medical record. Out comes your medical record. And then you have to correct it. It's a bit like computer translation. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. Well, that would probably be on the right channel, would generate millions of consumer records, which would, in 1 year, eclipse all the records that are now kept in electronic health records. I'll talk to you about the observer effect, because it's very important for consumers, I think, and why we should actually gather our information about ourselves. Our body is full of sensors. We call them cells. They correspond with each other in an ecology with chemical signals. The pharma industry has found this out, and they inject actually chemical pills so that they sort of help the information in our body. Now, just imagine that all the cells in our body, we have them outside of our body. Just imagine that instead of a biofeedback chemical, we have all this data in the palm of our hand or around us, and we look at it and we see ourselves, and we create a neural feedback loop. That data can be an extrinsic homeostatic device. Data can be healing. Data can be curative, because we create immediately a feedback loop, but with our neurons. And this here controls all this. So that's what we call the observer effect. Whatever you observe, you improve. But you have to have the data, or you can't improve it. So we, in the company, we also make these disposables. So this is colorimetric test. This is for maternal health, for women who are pregnant. So normally you go like 10, 15 times to a hospital for a urine test, you spend all day. Well, now you just buy these in packs. There is an algorithm, on the App Store. Click the algorithm. In 1 minute, you have all the data. And your doctor also has the data. So you don't have to go to the hospital anymore. But what is more, what we have seen is that if you have leukocytes and nitrites in an elevated space on these results, that all doctors immediately prescribe antibiotics because you have UTI, urinary tract infection. So why can't the algorithms do it? I think there is a future in the next years for algorithms to prescribe drugs, because it will be too mundane for doctors to do it themselves, I think. They have other, more interesting things to do. When my mother died, she had terminal cancer. I've been asking for 3 months before she died for her medical records. Never got them. So when she died, 2 days later, I got her medical records in the post. It's actually very strange. In Europe, this was in Europe, you have to die before you get your medical records. So they're sort of given to you post-mortem. A bit like, a lawyer, when you lose the case, you get a bill to close the file. But then, it struck me that these medical records are actually not for us, the consumer, for us, the patient. They are a billing system. So they are not a learning system. So we have to make, as consumers, our own medical records. We have to write them. And these medical records will be really beautiful, because when we make something for consumers, it will look like Apple, it will talk like Siri, there will be brains and it's sentient, there will be actuarial information, lots of machine learning. When we make something for the industry, it just needs to be functional. So the electronic health records of the future, which are now kept in hospitals, they will be like, I think, radio today. Marvin Minsky at MIT used to say that computer science is too important to be left in the hands of engineers. He didn't want to be derogatory towards engineers. He just meant that it is too important for us not to be involved. And the same thing could be asked with healthcare. Isn't healthcare too important to be left in the hands of only doctors? So we should also be involved. We should be active. We should not be passengers, but crew members. And, look at Airbnb and Uber, and, they're all multi-billion-dollar companies now. They have found unlocked potential within the consumer. We all have a car, we all have a room. We can make some money, but it's also social. that unlocked potential we also have in us as healers. We have empathy in us that is screaming to get out, because we all have been in situations where we have been next to people we love who are dying, and we are just sitting there, we're embarrassed, we don't have any information. We just tell lies like, we'll be okay, and you won't. So the citizen doctor in us is screaming to get out, and that's going to be a big part of consumer healthcare. I'm just going to, in the interest of time, I will give you the headings, and you pretend you're an algorithm and you can make it up. So big brands will take over medicine. It's a bit of a bold statement, but 2 days ago, Nestle just announced that they are setting up Nestle Health. We all know what they are going to do. Danone announced that they are going to set up Danone Health. Nestle is interested in food, Danone is interested in hydration, in water. You see, think of preventive dental healthcare. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now a multi-billion-dollar industry. Procter & Gamble, GSK, Colgate, they have taken it over. If you have money, your teeth are immortal. The dentists are the most entrepreneurial of doctors. So first, they have told us that we have to brush our teeth daily, then twice a day, then twice 2 minutes, then flossing, then rinsing, scraping our tongue. The next thing will be the microbiome and how this affects our health. And they will put in these little heads, which you put on your toothbrush, electric toothbrush, they will put very small sensors, and these sensors will make up your dental record. So a lot of preventive health will be taken over by big brands. So we as consumers, actually, we like it, because big brand healthcare, is very much targeted to us. Again, you can make up the content. Less is more is an interesting one. Mark Cuban is an American entrepreneur, and he came up with the idea that instead of going once a year to the doctor and having your blood values checked, perhaps you should, if you have the money, you should go every month. So the whole medical community immediately, jumped onto him, and they said, no, less is more. What I hadn't expected is the consumers got back and they said, what do you mean less is more? Because don't forget, in America, we've been telling consumers 100 years already that more is more. So the doctors tried to explain it. They said, look, there can be false positives, and the consumer will not know what it is. But, a simple math exercise, if I want to measure a value and I do it once a year, and it can be true or false, my odds of success are 50%, 0.5. If I do it every month, my odds of success, simplified, are 0.5 to the power of 12. That is 0.002%. That's a lot less risk than once a year. So the doctors came back and they said, look, we are going to get a lot of unnecessary questions. And that's where the whole consumer debate started. The consumer wants to be educated. In education, there is not something as an unnecessary question, because we have to learn. We will make mistakes, but that's how consumers progress. That's how we take over industries. And they are willing to pay for it. So it's a bit like my lawyers. They have never actually accused me of an unnecessary question that just billed me per minute. They are happy to educate me. They bring in other partners and talk about it. So just showing you this, it's every device that we make, everywhere in the world, we have the capacity to monitor it, to monitor the diagnostic and the recording activity, in which context it is used. If you are lying down or sitting, what you have done before, what you're doing after, how long it takes to scan, what the results are. Anonymously, we put it out, so everyone who uses our devices can compare himself or herself to anyone else in the world, or make like, I want to compare myself to, to France or to China or to Japan, and see how I compare. I think in the next phase, we will try to think of social technologies where we as consumers can talk to other consumers to find idiopathic long-tail diseases that nobody understands. So a sort of a cloud hospital. So what are we going to do with all these doctors? And before I do that, so if you want to join us, we are not only a company, we are also a movement. So we, the many, can change our destiny. And so, but we have to do it together as consumers. What are we going to do with all these doctors? I'm afraid that our hunger for medical information will not reduce the need for doctors, but we'll need 20 times, 30 times as many doctors as we have today. It now costs $1 million and 12 years to make a doctor. Probably we will use machines, and these machines, will take them 10 years to gather knowledge, to distill doctor knowledge in them. And it will cost $100 million, but in the end, they will not replace 100 doctors, but 1 million. What the difference will be between a doctor and a machine is between a private banker and an ATM machine. The problem for information overload will be, for the moment, it is filter failure. We need more filters. And a doctor is a great filter because they give us a point of view, they educate us. The same thing we have to do in machines, in algorithms, with citizen doctors, with expert patients, because there is going to be a hell of a lot of information to go through. And that's what we're up to. And it's a very, very exciting adventure. And I believe that this is going to be the headline of the 21st century, that we have completely rebooted the healthcare system. And everything that happened before, like the internet and social technology, although it might be unbelievable now, will be a footnote in the annals of the history of how we have thought about our own health. Thank you.